Be me anon. Somewhere in my mid-20s. Nothing special going on. Been dating this girl Claire for about a year and a half at this point. We met through mutual friends at some casual get-together. She seemed cool at first, smart, had a lot of opinions about everything. I was into that, honestly. I've always been the type of guy who likes someone who actually talks about stuff, not just sits there scrolling. So we started hanging out more, then it became a thing. Claire was big into feminism, like genuinely, not just in the I believe in equality way, more like she read books about it, had podcasts she followed, talked about it constantly, which, again, fine, whatever. I didn't have strong opinions either way. I just liked her, and that was enough for me at the start. The thing is, in our relationship, I was always the one making things happen. Not because she asked me to, or because we talked about it. It just sort of fell into place that way. If we were going somewhere on the weekend, I figured out where. If we wanted to try something new, I suggested it. I booked things. I planned dinners. I remembered dates. Her birthday, the little anniversaries, that stuff. And she genuinely seemed to appreciate it. She'd tell her friends about it, and I'd overhear things like, Anon always knows what to do. Which felt good, not gonna lie. Felt like I was doing something right. So, that dynamic worked, at least for a good while. We went on a trip together once. I planned the whole thing. Found the place, booked the accommodation, figured out what we'd do each day. She loved it. Told me it was the best trip she'd ever been on. I remember feeling genuinely proud of that. Like, yeah, I did that. I made that happen for us. It felt like being a good partner was something I was actually decent at. So I kept doing it. It became my role without anyone naming it. I was the planner. She was the one who'd show up and enjoy things. And I didn't resent that at the time. I genuinely liked doing it. There's something satisfying about making someone happy with a well-chosen restaurant or getting tickets to something before it sells out. It sounds small, but it adds up. You feel useful. You feel like you're contributing something. That feeling of, yeah, I thought about you. I made this happen for you. It matters. Anyway, things were good for a while. We'd been together maybe 8 or 9 months when things started shifting slightly. Nothing dramatic, just small comments here and there. She started talking more about autonomy and decision-making in relationships. At first, I thought she was talking about her friends' relationships, because she had this one friend whose boyfriend was controlling, and she'd vent about that sometimes. But then the comments started feeling a little more directed. Like once I suggested we go to a specific place for her friend's birthday gathering, and she said something like, "It's nice that you want to help, but you should check with everyone first." I did check. Everyone was fine with it. But the way she said it stuck with me a little, like there was a tiny edge to it. I didn't make it into anything. Wrote it off as her just being in a mood or picking up habits from whatever podcast she was listening to that week. She went through phases with those. For a while, everything was about emotional labor. Then it was about invisible mental load. I tried to be a good listener when she'd explain these concepts to me. Sometimes I agreed. Sometimes I thought she was stretching things a bit. But I kept most of that to myself. I'm not someone who needs to win every conversation. So months pass. Things are mostly normal. We have our routines. We hang out a lot. She stays over often. I'm still doing most of the planning. She's still mostly going along with it. Then one evening, we're just sitting at home, nothing going on. She turns to me with this specific expression she gets when she has something to say. I'd learned to recognize that look. And she tells me that she's been thinking about our relationship dynamics. She says she feels like I take up a lot of decision-making space, that I make plans without really consulting her first, and that it makes her feel like her input doesn't matter. She uses the word consent somewhere in there, like I should be asking for consent before making plans that involve her time. I remember sitting there trying to figure out if I was supposed to be offended. because on the surface it sounds reasonable. Like, yes, obviously I should consider her when making plans. But I was always considering her. That was literally the whole point. I planned things for her, not without her. Still, I didn't say any of that. I asked her what she'd prefer. She said she'd like it if I asked her before booking anything or committing to anything. Just run it by her, get her actual input, don't assume. I said, sure, that makes sense, I can do that. And I meant it. I figured it'd just mean adding a step, like instead of booking a restaurant, I'd text her first. Simple adjustment, not a big deal. I actually thought it might be kind of nice to have her more involved. Maybe she'd start suggesting things too, and we'd actually plan stuff together. That seemed like a decent outcome. So I started doing it exactly like she asked. Next time I thought of something for us to do, I brought it up first. There was a food festival thing happening not too far from us. I'd seen it mentioned online and thought she'd like it. She's into that kind of stuff. Local vendors, trying different foods. So I texted her about it, asked if she'd want to go. She said, "Oh, that sounds fun. Let me check my schedule." I waited. Couple days passed. I followed up gently. Not in a pushy way, just like, "Hey, did you get a chance to look?" She said she hadn't forgotten. She'd let me know. The weekend came. No answer. So we didn't go, which was fine. Maybe she was genuinely busy or just didn't feel like it. I let it go. Tried again a little later with something else. There was a comedy show coming up, a guy we both found funny. Decent seats still available. I texted her about it, explained what it was, sent her the link. She said it looked good and she'd think about it. Few days of nothing. I asked once more. She said, "Yeah, I think so, probably." Which I took as a soft yes. So I went ahead and got the tickets. This was maybe 2 or 3 weeks out from the show. I figured plenty of time, she'd confirmed-ish, it'd be fine. The day of the show rolls around. I'm already thinking about what we'd grab to eat beforehand. She texts me in the afternoon saying she's wiped out and doesn't think she can make it. Asked if we could reschedule. I stared at the tickets on my phone. They were non-refundable. I didn't say anything dramatic about it. Just said, okay, no worries. But internally that stung more than I expected. Not even because of the money, though that wasn't nothing. More because I had done exactly what she asked. I checked, I got a yes, I planned around that yes, and it still fell apart. I told Marcus about it because he's been my closest friend for years, and he just went quiet for a second and then said, "Bro." Just that, nothing else, which honestly communicated everything. I laughed it off, said it was fine, probably just bad timing. He gave me a look, but didn't push it, so I kept going with the new system. I figured maybe I just needed to be more specific when I asked. Like instead of vague, "want to do X," I'd ask for a concrete yes or no, give her actual options, so it was easy to respond. There was a weekend coming up where I thought it'd be nice to get out of the city. Nothing extravagant, just somewhere an hour or two away. I laid it all out for her, said I was thinking of renting a place for 2 nights, gave her 2 or 3 different options to look at, different vibes, different price points. Told her I wouldn't book anything until she actually confirmed. She said it all looked great, and she was excited. I asked her to pick one so I could get it sorted. She said she trusted my judgment. I should just pick. So I picked the one that seemed most like her style. Relaxed, near some hiking trails, nice little town nearby. I booked it, sent her the confirmation. She seemed happy about it. We talked about what we'd bring, what we'd do. It felt like things were actually working again. Then, the day before we were supposed to leave, she calls me and says she can't go. Her reasoning was a little hard to follow. Something about how she felt like I'd made the final call on the location without properly looping her in. I reminded her she told me to pick. She said that's true, but she felt pressured into that, and that the whole process had felt top down. I sat with that for a long minute. I had asked. She had said yes. She had told me to choose. I chose. I booked. Where exactly was the step I missed? I didn't ask that out loud. I just said okay and canceled what I could. Lost the booking fee. Couldn't get that back. Sat there for a moment staring at the cancellation confirmation email. There was something almost funny about it, in a grim way. I had a paper trail that literally documented every step I'd taken. Ask, receive yes, ask again, receive yes, book based on yes, lose booking. Like a logic puzzle where every answer leads to the same wrong outcome. Went to my room, sat on the edge of my bed. Didn't even feel angry exactly. More like something had quietly run out of fuel. I texted Marcus, told him what happened. He called me instead of texting back, asked me to walk him through the whole thing. I did. He listened the whole way, didn't interrupt. Then he said, "So you asked. She said yes. She told you to decide. You decided. And she still canceled." I said, "Yeah, that's basically it." He said, "Okay." Long pause. I could hear him thinking through it. Then he said, "What are you going to do?" And I didn't have an answer for that. Not because I was dramatic about it. I just genuinely didn't know what the right move was anymore. Because I had followed the rules exactly, and it still didn't work. And the more I thought about it, the more circular it seemed. She wanted me to ask permission before planning. I asked. She wanted input. I gave her options. She deferred back to me. I made a choice based on her deference. Somehow that became the problem. It was like trying to solve a puzzle where one of the pieces keeps changing shape. I didn't bring any of this up with Claire that night. I didn't want to have a big argument. I just needed to think. And what I kept coming back to was this. Maybe the problem was that I was still the one initiating everything. Maybe the real thing she wanted was for me to stop being the one who generated all the plans in the first place. So I made a decision. Not out of spite. I want to be clear about that. I didn't sit there rubbing my hands together thinking about how to make her suffer. I genuinely just thought, okay, I'll stop initiating. If she wants to do something, she can bring it up. If she wants to go somewhere, she can suggest it. And then I'll ask her if it's okay, like she wanted. We'd just do it from the other direction. Simple. So that's what I did. I stopped suggesting things, stopped looking up restaurants or events or weekend ideas, stopped being the one who'd say, "Hey, what if we did this?" I was still there, still present, still a good boyfriend in every other way, but the planning thing just stopped coming from me. First week was quiet. We still saw each other, just didn't really go anywhere specific. She didn't seem to notice much at first, or didn't say anything if she did. We'd hang out at one of our places, cook something, watch something. It was relaxed in the way that things are relaxed when nothing is being asked of anyone. Second week, same kind of energy. She mentioned once that we'd been pretty low-key lately. I said yeah, asked if she had something in mind she wanted to do. She said not really, just observing. I nodded and left it there. Didn't feel the need to fill the silence with a plan just because she'd noticed the silence. I was waiting to see if she'd feel the pull of wanting something, and then maybe actually suggest it. That's all I was doing. Third week. She brought up that a friend of hers was having people over, said she was thinking of going and would I want to come. I said sure, sounds good. We went. It was fine. Met some people I didn't know that well, had decent conversations. Nothing notable happened, but on the way home she seemed a little off. Quieter than usual, like she was expecting something and it hadn't happened. I couldn't tell what, though. I didn't ask, partly because I genuinely didn't know what question to ask, and partly because I was tired of asking questions that led nowhere useful. A few more weeks went by like that. We'd hang out, but it was just sort of drifting. I'd come over, we'd watch something, we'd eat something, but there was nothing to look forward to. No plans on the horizon. No, oh, next weekend we're doing this. Just one undefined day rolling into the next. And here's the thing, I didn't actually feel that bad about it, which surprised me. I thought I'd miss planning stuff. Turns out what I'd actually been craving wasn't the planning. It was the feeling of appreciation that used to come with it. That was what I missed. The look she'd get when something went well. The Anon always takes care of everything. That had been the reward. And once that stopped being reliable, the planning itself lost its point. So I was genuinely fine just being still. She was less fine, I could tell. She started texting more during the week, little things, sending me stuff she'd seen online, memes, articles, which was sweet, but it also felt like she was circling something. I responded normally, didn't overthink it. Her birthday was coming up. Not super close, but within view. I knew it was coming. I had it in my head. And I also knew that the old version of me would have been deep into planning mode by now, figuring out a dinner, a surprise, something to make her feel special. I'd done that the previous year and she loved it. But this year I didn't start planning anything. Not because I forgot, not because I didn't care, but because under the current arrangement, I was supposed to ask first, and she hadn't brought it up. So I waited. Her birthday got closer. Still nothing from her side. A week out, still no conversation about it. I thought maybe she'd bring it up herself, say something like, "So what are we doing for my birthday?" She didn't. I wasn't going to just launch into full planning mode like the rules had never been set. So I got her a gift, something I knew she'd like. I wrapped it. I had a card. On her actual birthday, I was there. I gave her the gift. I took her to dinner. Just the two of us, a place she liked. Nothing elaborate, no surprises, no big production. The dinner was fine. She was pleasant enough. But I could see something simmering underneath. On the way home, she was quiet. When we got back to her place, she said she'd expected more. Not in a dramatic way, just flat. Said the previous year had been different, and she thought maybe I was planning something. I asked her when she had brought up wanting to do something special. She said she shouldn't have to. I should know. I sat with that for a second. I said something like, "You told me to check in before making plans. I didn't hear from you about your birthday, so I didn't assume." She said that was different, that birthdays were obvious. I said I understood that, but I was going off what she'd asked for. She went quiet. I could tell she was frustrated, but she didn't have a clean argument to make. So the conversation kind of dissolved. We didn't fight, she didn't yell. It just got quiet and stayed quiet. I went home. Texted Marcus on the way. Told him what happened. He said, "She's going to blame this on your emotional unavailability watch." I told him to stop. He sent a laughing emoji. I knew he was right, though. Not because he's cynical or anything like that. He's just good at seeing where things are going. The pattern here wasn't that hard to read. I'd done something that technically made sense, followed a stated preference exactly, and the result was going to get named as an emotional failure on my part anyway. Not because Claire was calculating, just because feelings don't care about logical consistency. She'd felt something missing, and the missing thing needed a label. And that label was probably not going to be the natural consequence of what I asked for. Couple days passed. Then Claire brought something up that I hadn't expected. She said she'd been thinking about everything and felt like I was pulling back from her. That she'd read this thing about how men sometimes use emotional withdrawal as a way of punishing their partners. And she'd been wondering if that was what was happening here. I asked what she meant by withdrawing. She said I wasn't putting in effort anymore, wasn't being proactive about the relationship, wasn't showing up. I asked her what specifically she had wanted me to do. She said she wanted me to surprise her sometimes, to initiate things. I said, "You told me to ask permission before making plans." She said yes, but not to the point where I'd just stop entirely. I said I was trying to follow what she'd asked for. She said there was a difference between checking in and just going completely passive, and maybe on paper she had a point, but I was struggling to see where exactly the line was. Because every time I initiated something and asked, it fell apart. I didn't lay all that out in that conversation. I kind of just said I'd heard her and I'd think about it, which was me being diplomatic, not dismissive. I genuinely was thinking about it. I just didn't have a clear answer for how to thread that needle. Ask, but also don't wait to be asked to ask. Plan, but also confirm, but also don't make her feel like planning is being done to her. The logic was getting tangled. Meanwhile, she had started spending more time with her friends. Not suspicious, just more frequent. Which was fine. Her friends were her friends. But I noticed she'd come back from those hangouts a little bit different. Slightly more agitated, slightly more loaded with opinions. I figured she was talking about us with them. Which people do. I wasn't going to pretend that's unusual. But it did make me wonder what the version of events they were hearing looked like. One night, she came back from one of those hangouts and told me that she'd talked to her friends about us, and that they thought I was exhibiting classic male toxicity, the withdrawing thing, the going passive, all of it. Apparently, the consensus among them was that I was doing this deliberately to make her feel like she needed me, like some kind of power play. I genuinely didn't know how to respond to that for a second, because from my side I had done the exact opposite of a power play. I had given up the one thing I was actively doing in the relationship. I'd stepped back, and somehow that had become a manipulation tactic. I asked her if she actually believed that. She said she didn't know, she was trying to understand. I said there was nothing to understand, I just stopped assuming. She said she felt like she'd lost something, but couldn't articulate what. I thought about pointing out that what she'd lost was the thing she told me to stop doing. But I didn't say it. I said I needed to think, and I went home. Marcus and I got food at some point around here. I walked him through everything, the whole timeline. He listened all the way through without interrupting, which is unusual for him. Then he said, "So basically you did what she asked, and now it's toxic behavior." I said that was a bit simplified. He said, "Is it though?" I didn't answer. He ordered another drink and said the whole thing was insane to him. Not in a women are crazy way. More like genuine bewilderment. Like, how do you build a system where following the rules is the violation? I said I didn't think she was doing it on purpose. I genuinely didn't think Claire was sitting at home plotting. I thought she had genuinely wanted more input, felt genuinely good about setting that expectation. And then, when the reality of what that meant played out, it felt wrong in a way she hadn't anticipated. Because the planning I'd been doing wasn't just logistics, it was also the visible proof that I was thinking about her. When that stopped, she noticed the absence of something. But she'd framed the absence as my failure, not as the natural result of her own request. Marcus said that was very generous of me. I said I was just trying to be fair. He said I should probably tell her that directly. And I knew he was right. But I also wasn't sure she was ready to hear it without it turning into a fight. A few more days passed. Tension at this point was low-grade constant, not explosive, just present. Like the air in a room that needs a window opened. She'd be perfectly nice in one moment, and then slightly distant the next. I was doing my best to just be steady, showing up, being present, not being cold. But also not suddenly reverting to full planning mode just because things were uncomfortable. That felt like it would prove something I didn't want to prove. Then her friend group had a get-together at someone's apartment. A proper one, with multiple people, not just a small hangout. Claire and I both went. Marcus was there too, actually. He knows some of those people. At some point in the evening, Claire and her friends were on one side of the room. I was with Marcus and a couple other people on the other side. I wasn't watching her or paying attention to what she was talking about. But then I heard my name. Not clearly, just the shape of it in a conversation. And I could tell from the body language of her friends that the topic had shifted toward me. Couple of glances my direction. I kept my face neutral and kept talking to Marcus. Claire came over a bit later and pulled me slightly aside. Not dramatically, just a step away from the group. And she said in a lower voice that her friends had asked about us, and she told them things hadn't been great lately. I nodded. She said they thought I should be making more effort, that the birthday thing had been a red flag, apparently, that you don't just do nothing for your girlfriend's birthday. I kept my voice even. I said I hadn't done nothing. I'd been there, given her a gift, taken her to dinner. She said it wasn't the same as before. I said that was true. It wasn't. She waited for me to say more. I said we could talk about it properly later, not here with everyone around. She said fine and went back to her friends, but I could see her saying something to them, probably not flattering, and a couple of them looked over again. Marcus materialized at my elbow and said quietly, "You're about to become the villain in a group chat." I told him to be quiet. He said he was just calling it. Later in the evening, after a few drinks had gone around and things had loosened up, Claire brought it up again, this time not quietly. She said to the group broadly that she'd been dealing with a frustrating situation, that she'd asked for something reasonable in her relationship and felt like she'd gotten punished for it. I felt several sets of eyes move toward me. I stayed where I was and didn't say anything yet. She kept going, said she'd just wanted more communication, more checking in, and instead the person she was with had basically shut down, stopped making plans, stopped putting in effort, made her birthday feel like nothing. Someone in the group made a sympathetic noise, and that was the moment I decided to actually respond. Not aggressively, not to embarrass her. I just thought this was going to keep building if I didn't say something real. I said calmly that I wanted to make sure the full picture was out there. She turned and looked at me. I said that a few months back she'd asked me to check in before making any plans, to not assume, to ask permission first. I said I'd taken that seriously and done exactly that. Asked before booking anything, waited for a yes before committing. I said the first time I asked about something, she didn't respond for days and the weekend passed. The time I got a yes and bought tickets, she canceled the day of. The time I planned a trip and got a confirmed yes and booked it, she called it off the night before. And when I'd asked her which place to book because she'd told me to choose, she later said she'd felt pressured into deferring. I laid it out flat, not heated, just the sequence of events. Then I said that after all of that, I stopped initiating. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because every time I tried, following exactly the process she'd outlined, it still ended badly. So I waited for her to bring something up instead, and she didn't, including about her birthday. The room was quiet. Claire's expression had shifted from frustrated to something harder to read. I looked at her friends. A couple of them were looking at Claire now instead of me. One of them, to her credit, asked Claire if that was how it had happened. Claire said it was more complicated than that. I said I agreed it was complicated, but the complication wasn't me withdrawing. It was that the system she'd asked for hadn't worked the way she expected. And I understood that. I wasn't blaming her for that. I just wanted to be clear that I hadn't been doing nothing out of laziness or spite. I was genuinely trying to find a way to operate within what she'd asked for. Silence. Marcus was somewhere behind me, and very wisely said nothing. One of Claire's friends said something about how that sounded really frustrating for both of them, which was actually kind of a graceful thing to say. Claire didn't respond to that. She looked at me for a moment, and then away. I could see she was processing. The conversation didn't go anywhere dramatic from there. People kind of moved on, the way social groups do when something uncomfortable surfaces, started talking about other things. Claire and I didn't really interact much for the rest of the evening. On the way out, she said we needed to talk. I said yes, we did. We didn't do it that night. It was late, and neither of us was in the right space for it. She went home. I went home. Marcus walked out with me and said, "That was a lot." I said, "Yeah." He said I'd been fair about it in there. I said I didn't know if fair was the right word. I just didn't want to keep having a version of this conversation where only half the story was in the room. He nodded, said to let him know how the actual talk went. I said I would. Went home, didn't sleep great. Not because I was upset exactly, more because I kept turning things over. Not in an anxious spiral, just genuine thinking. About what I actually wanted from this relationship going forward. Because something had changed for me over the past few months. Not in a dramatic way, I didn't suddenly stop caring about Claire. But my confidence in the thing had shifted. I used to be pretty sure about us. Like this was good, this was going somewhere, I was happy. Now I was less sure. Not because she'd asked for more communication. That part was genuinely fine. More because of what the attempt to follow that request had revealed. Like the structure we'd been operating in was maybe more fragile than I'd assumed. When I was doing all the planning, everything looked functional. Take away the planning, and suddenly there wasn't much of a current keeping things moving. We met up a couple days later to actually talk. Her place, just us. She started by saying she'd been thinking a lot. Said she understood that she'd asked me to change something, and that I had genuinely tried, and that things hadn't worked out the way she'd expected. I said I appreciated her saying that. She said she still felt like I'd withdrawn in a way that hurt, that even if my logic was consistent, the effect was the same as if I'd just stopped caring. I said I understood that. And I said the honest thing, which was that the effect on me had been different. That spending months trying to plan things within her new framework and hitting walls every time had been exhausting in a way I hadn't expected. Not earth-shattering, just quietly draining. And it had made me realize that I'd been running on the appreciation of doing things for her. And when that equation changed, I'd lost the fuel. She sat with that, didn't get defensive, asked me what I needed. I said I needed to feel like the effort was mutual, not 50-50 on logistics necessarily, but that she'd sometimes be the one thinking about us. Suggesting something, initiating something, showing that she'd been thinking about me the way I'd been thinking about her. She said she heard that. She said she thought she'd assumed it was enough to appreciate what I did. But she saw now that appreciation isn't the same as participation. That was actually a good way of putting it. I said, yeah, exactly. We talked for a while longer. It wasn't a fight, it was more like actually looking at something clearly that we'd both been walking around. By the end of it, we hadn't made any grand declarations, but it felt like something real had gotten said. I drove home that night and sat in the car in the parking lot for a few minutes. Not dramatically, just collecting myself. The conversation had gone better than I expected, but I was still sitting with the question I'd been carrying for weeks, which was, what do I actually want this to look like? Because I knew I could go back to planning things. I even wanted to, a little. I like doing nice things for people I care about. That's just who I am. But I needed to know the version of me doing that was valued, not just used. And I didn't have the answer to that yet. I think the only honest thing I could say to myself that night was, wait and see. See if something shifts. See if she starts showing up differently. And if she does, great. And if she doesn't, well, that's also an answer. A few days after that conversation, I was at Marcus's place, just hanging out, nothing planned, which felt right, given the theme of recent months. He asked how things stood. I told him about the talk, the main points. He said it sounded mature. I said it was, actually. He said, so what now? I said I didn't know. I was going to see how things moved. He said that seemed reasonable. Poured us both something. Just sat there for a while, not talking. Which is something I value about him. The ability to just be, without needing to fill every second. Eventually he said, You ever think you used to just do too much? Not mean about it, genuinely asking. I said maybe. He said not in a bad way, like it's a good quality. But sometimes people get used to a thing, and then the thing becomes invisible. Like you stop noticing the effort because it's always there. And then, when it's gone, you miss the result, but not the work that made it happen. I said that was pretty much it. He nodded, said it happens. We left it there. A week or so passed. Claire texted me one afternoon, said she'd found tickets to something she thought we'd both like, asked if I wanted to go. I said yes. She sent the info. She'd already bought them. I said thanks for thinking of that. She said she wanted to try. That was it. That was the whole exchange. But it meant something. Not in a huge, world-changing way. Just in the way small things mean something when they're pointed in the right direction. We went. It was good. She seemed happy. I was relaxed. On the way back, she grabbed my hand while we were walking. I didn't say anything about it. Just held her hand and kept walking. I still don't know exactly where things are headed. Whether it'll keep moving better or whether this was just a short, good patch. I'm not going to pretend I've got it figured out. But I know a few things more clearly than I did before. I know that being the one who puts in all the effort isn't automatically the same as being a good partner. It can look like it from the outside. It can even feel like it for a while. But at some point you start to realize you're running a machine that only works because you're pushing it. And that's not a partnership. That's just labor with company. I also know that I should have said something earlier. Not dramatically, not with a list of grievances. Just said, hey, I notice I'm always the one driving this. Does that seem normal to you? That conversation might have happened before all the other stuff, but it didn't. So here we are. I'm also not bitter about any of it. That's the thing I want to be clear about. I don't think Claire is a bad person. I don't think she set out to drain me or take advantage of anything. I think she had a real feeling, asked for a change, and didn't fully track what that change would mean in practice. And when the result wasn't what she expected, she reached for the easiest explanation, which was that I was pulling away on purpose. That's a human thing to do. I've done versions of it myself. The classic male toxicity thing from her friends still stings a little, if I'm being honest. Not because it ruined my day, but because it's the kind of thing that gets said and sticks. The idea that a guy stepping back from doing everything is automatically a power play, as if the only acceptable version of a man in a relationship is one who keeps producing and never pauses. That framing leaves no room for a guy to just be tired, or confused, or trying to figure out what the rules actually are. It assumes bad intent before anything else. And, yeah, that still bothers me a little. But I'm not going to be the guy who's still thinking about it 6 months from now. I said my piece, she heard it, we're moving. And if it slides back to the old pattern, I'll say something sooner this time. That's the lesson I'm actually taking from all of it. Not that planning is bad, or that setting expectations is bad, just that when something starts feeling off, waiting and hoping it self-corrects is a slower and more painful option than just saying something. Obvious in hindsight. Always is. So, yeah, that's the story. I still plan things sometimes. Thought about a weekend trip recently, actually. Mentioned it to her casually. She immediately started looking stuff up on her phone to help figure it out. Small thing, but it felt different from before. She does stuff like that now, occasionally. It's not perfectly balanced, and I don't expect it to be, but it's different from how it was. Which is either progress or just a different pattern. Hard to say yet. Honestly, I'm okay with not knowing yet. I spent a long time thinking I had it figured out, doing all the things, thinking that was enough. Turns out that confidence was just me not asking the right questions. So maybe sitting with uncertainty for a while is actually the more honest place to be. Marcus says I should just enjoy it and stop analyzing. I told him that's easy to say when you're not the one in it. He shrugged and said fair enough, then said, but seriously, stop analyzing. He's probably right. Anyway, that's it. MFW. I followed the rules, and the rules didn't work. MFW. The solution was apparently to talk like adults. Who knew?